In this part of episode 10, we're going to be talking about how to solve other varieties of problems involving percents. We have just talked about how to find a certain percent of a given number. If I wanted, for example, to find 55% of 400, I would just use the fact that the keyword of corresponds to multiplication. And I would use the fact that percents can be rewritten as decimal numbers, and then I would simply take that decimal number and multiply it by the given number using a calculator. But there are other varieties of percent problems that can be asked. For example, someone might say, 8 is 50% of what number? Here, the thing I'm taking 50% of is unknown, and what I am given is the result of that calculation. 8 is 50% of what? Now, to answer a question like this one, I'm going to call your attention to a certain property of multiplication and division. And to show you the property that I have in mind, here is an exploratory question. If I start with a number, for example, if I start with the number 2, if I take that number and multiply it by 3, and then divide the result by that same number 3, what happens in the end if I multiply by 3 and then divide by that same amount? Well, 2 times 3 gives me a result of 6. 6 divided by 3 gives me a result of 2. If I multiply by 3 and then divide by 3, I get back the exact same thing I started with. And I can do similar calculations with other numbers, right? For example, if I start with 4 and I multiply by 5 and then I divide by 5, 4 times 5 results in 20. 20 divided by 5 results in 4. And look, it's exactly the same thing that I started with. So what we have observed from these two examples is that if you multiply by a number and then you divide by the same number, these two actions, if you take them back to back, these two actions will cancel each other out. If I take 2 and multiply it by 3 and then divide it by 3, those two actions of multiplying and dividing by the same number cancel each other out, and essentially what I'm left with is the same 2 that I had at the start. Likewise, if I have a 4 and it's multiplied by 5 and divided by 5, this multiplied 5 and this divided 5 cancel each other out, and so I'm left with just the same 4 that I started with. So multiplication has the power to cancel division, and division has the power to cancel multiplication. Those two actions are opposites, and they destroy each other. So with that in mind, let me show you how I might approach solving a problem like 8 is 50% of what number? I'm going to translate this English sentence into a mathematical statement, basically one word at a time. When we say that one thing is another thing, we're saying that those two quantities are the same, that they are equal to each other. We also know that the keyword of corresponds to multiplication. And this expression what, or what number, refers to a value that is currently unknown. So I might represent it, for example, with a question mark to represent the fact that I don't know what this number is just now. So if I write down this sentence one piece at a time, I would say 8, the number 8 is equals. The number 8 is 50% of 50% of multiply what number? 8 is the same thing. 8 is equal to 50% times question mark. Now, my goal is to figure out from this statement what is the value of the question mark. What is question mark equal to? And to figure out what question mark is equal to, what I'm going to do is I am going to divide by 50% in order to cancel out this multiplied 50% on the right side. But if two quantities are the same and I want to keep them equal to each other, then I need to perform the same action to the quantity on the right side and the quantity on the left side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide the number on both sides of the equal sign by the 50% to get rid of the multiplied 50% on the right side. So if I do that, now on the left side I have 8 divided by 50%. On the right side I have 50% times question mark divided by 50%. And now that I have both multiplied and divided by 50%, those two actions cancel each other out. And I'm just left with unknown number question mark equals 8 divided by 50%. So now all I have to do to get the value of the unknown number in this question is to complete this division that I've written here on the left side. 8 divided by 50%, 8 divided by 0.5 as a decimal number. If I do that for example in the calculator, 8 divided by 50% is 16. Let's check this makes sense as an answer to the question. They said 8 is 50% of what number? I have just said 8 is 50% of 16. And that makes sense. We remember that 50% is taking half of something, and half of 16 is indeed 8. So here, by figuring out what is the value of the unknown number, I've said that 8 is 50% of 16. Let's summarize the process that we just did for solving percent problems. I would translate the question into symbols, one word at a time. Using the fact that the word is corresponds to two quantities being equal to each other, the word of corresponds to multiplication, and if you see the word what or the word what number, this refers to an unknown value that you could represent, for example, using a question mark. Now, if you're dealing with a really simple percent problem, then you may be able to find the value of question mark immediately just by using your calculator. But in some other questions, your question mark may end up being multiplied by a value like 50%. And if your question mark is multiplied by a value like 50%, then you need to divide both quantities on both sides of the equal sign by that number to get rid of the multiplied number next to your question mark. If necessary, divide both quantities on both sides of the equal sign um, by the number multiplied by question mark. So let's do a few more examples to show you how I would use this process in different situations. Someone says 4 is 10% of what number? So I'm going to take this sentence and I'm going to translate it one symbol at a time. 4 is equals 10% of times what number? So question mark. Now, my goal is to figure out what is the value of question mark. And right now, question mark is being multiplied by 10%. And I would like to get rid of this multiplied 10% so that I can have just question mark by itself on one side of the equal sign. So what I'm going to do to get rid of this multiplied 10% is I'm going to divide by 10%. And if I divide the quantity on the right side of the equal sign by 10%, then I'm going to do the exact same thing to the quantity on the left side of the equal sign in order to keep those two quantities the same. Now, if I eliminate the multiplied and the divided 10%, I'm left with just question mark equals 4 divided by 10%. And this is something I can do in the calculator just by taking 10% and turning it into a decimal number. And I find that question mark is equal to 4 divided by 0.1. Question mark must be equal to 40. So in other words, what I am saying is that 4 is 10% of 40. And this makes sense, right? We learned that if you want to take 10% of a number, all you have to do is scooch the decimal place 1 unit to the left, and that gives us 4. 4 is 10% of 40. Now someone asks, okay, what is 25% of 30? So if I translate this sentence one at a time, they're saying what is 25% of 30? Now, in this situation, the quantity that I'm trying to figure out, the question mark representing the what, representing the unknown number, is already by itself on one side of the equal sign. So all I have to do to finish answering this question is use the calculator to figure out what is the value of 25% of 30, 25% times 30 here on the right side. So I'm going to turn this percent value into a decimal value so I can multiply it in the calculator. And I find that the unknown number in this problem has a value of 7.5. So in other words, what we've just said is that 7.5 is 25% of 30. And then the final sort of variety of percent problem, someone says 5 is what percent of 20? So this time it's the percentage that we don't know, and we're trying to figure it out. So someone says 5 is what percent? What percent of times 20? So if I translate that English sentence one word at a time, that becomes 5 equal sign question mark percent of multiplied by 20. Now the quantity I'm trying to figure out is what is the percent, right? And that question mark percent, that unknown percent, is currently being multiplied by 20. And I would like to get this unknown quantity by itself on the right side of the equal sign. So I need to get rid of this multiplied 20. And to get rid of this multiplied 20, what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide by 20. 5 divided by 20. And then the unknown percent times 20. And then I'm going to divide to get rid of that 20. The multiplied and divided 20 eliminate each other, and I'm left with my unknown percent is equal to 5 divided by 20. And if I put that in a calculator, 5 divided by 20 is equal to 0.25. Now, right now, the number that I'm looking for is in the format of a percent. And the number that I just calculated is in the format of a decimal. So in order to make the formats match up, I'm going to convert the number on the left. Now to convert a decimal to a percent, we move the decimal place 2 units back to the right, which gives me that 25 is the unknown percent value. 25 is the unknown percent. And so what I'm saying is that 5 is 25%. 5 is what percent? 5 is 25% of 20. And this makes sense, right? We've said that 25% can be found by taking your number and cutting it in half 2 times. So if I cut 20 in half once, that gives me 10. If I cut 10 in half again, that gives me 5. So yes, this makes sense. 5 is 25% of 20. That it would be the unknown value in this problem.